Hi guys, it's Cindy from Cindy's Art. Today we're going to paint a cup of cocoa and with cookies. And this is pink, which I love pink, and it reminds me of Valentine's Day that's coming up. So I found the image on Pixabay, and you can go on that website, find some photos of things that you want to paint, and then give the artist credit. I started off with a light sketch, and I'll make that available on my Patreon page. And then I worked wet on wet, but I worked in sections. I started off with this mug, and I am not adding a lot of deep colors to this right now. What I'm looking for is always the light first, and I'm painting in some of the lightest parts of the mug because I'm going to protect them later on. I'm using shell pink in here, a little bit of quinacridone scarlet for some of the darker tones. I'm using a little bit of permanent violet and a touch of blue, a little bit, and that helps me add shadow into it without using a gray or a black in it. So I layer that, I painted that layer first. This is a second coat right here. I let it dry in between, and then I will add another layer of paint. Now you can see towards the bottom, I'm adding in some of my shadow and some of the reflective lines that are on this cup, on this mug. I'm finishing up the second layer, and then I'm going to put masking fluid on every place in this painting that has whites. And in a second you're going to see how I have a little container, a plastic container that has a needle nose on top of it, and it lets out just a tiny bit of masking fluid. I'm using that to create little tiny dots. Then I let that dry. After I did all this, I let this dry, and then I wanted to paint the background of the picture. So if I'm going to do that, what I want to do is take my paintbrush, and I'm only going to wet down the areas that I want paint on. I'm not going to put water on top of the cup or that jar or the tabletop. And the reason why is I don't want that paint bleeding into any area except for where water is. And that's one of the great things about working with watercolor is wherever you put the water is where the paint will run. So if you're not a subscriber yet, I would love to have you as a part of the channel and a part of our community here. But I always look to hear your voice. What are you painting? What are you wanting to paint? Tell me how things are going. And I love to hear feedback, but I love to hear your thoughts on what you would like us to paint or other types of lessons that I can speak into. I teach on supplies and how to make watercolor affordable. We all need that. Now that tabletop was painted after I let the background dry. So I'm always letting sections dry, and then I can move forward with the next ones. And on this tabletop, I decided I wanted it darker because later on, I'm looking at the painting, I'm asking myself, what do you need? And I might take a day or two to decide that. And I felt that the painting overall was so light, and I did not want to darken the color of that mug, that I needed to create something dark. There's a 2/3 rule in watercolor. You need to have 2/3 of it light or 2/3 of the painting dark. So I needed to find my balance in that. Basically right now all I'm doing is adding light colors into the cookie at the top, that's shell pink. That red is pyrrole red, and then you can use quinacridone scarlet as well. I love those colors. And I add pink into my reds. I like to brighten it up, or I'll use a tiny bit of a blue to do that. Play with your colors, just try different things. Then for, excuse me, the cookie, sorry guys. So for the cookie, I used a little bit of dark umber, burnt umber for the shadow, and then the lighter part, a tiny, tiny bit of yellow ochre and raw sienna. And as I've moved on to the jar, this is very, very light, very soft. When something's white, it's not really white. It has blues and it might have like orangish colors into it. So I had fun with this jar, and I used a tiny bit of quinacridone scarlet for that pink tone. And then the blue was cerulean blue, and I have a tiny bit of horizon, which is like a green color, and that horizon blue is used in the background of that snow behind that white jar as well. So in the background, just to tell you, I used horizon, then I used a tiny bit of neutral on that left, and that tiny bit of indigo to the jar, behind the jar on the right-hand side. Wow, this is going super fast, so I'm already into the marshmallow. Oh my gosh. The marshmallow, this whipped cream, it's really whipped cream. I used a tiny bit of yellow ochre mixed with a tiny bit of raw sienna, and that is the yellow tone. I used a little bit of neutral for the very, very dark, and then I used a little bit of horizon in there for that lighter tone of the marshmallow. And I'm going to give you some close-ups on that. Right now I'm rotating around on the painting, and I'm making sure I add in some shadows. I want to see the outline of the jar. Where's the lid? Where's the bottom? Is the shadow on the jar? Does it go off to the left? Because the sun's coming from the right, and so I've got to have those shadows in there. So this is what it looks like so far, and I continue to ask myself, what does this painting need? I'm at the point where I'm building up more color, and in order to build up more color and to bring more of this painting to life, I'll add in more layers of color. I tend to do that kind of light. I'm not necessarily super bold in a painting like this because I want to keep it soft. So you'll see me lay down a color, then I'll take a brush that only has water on it, and I'll use that to soften up the edges so nothing looks really super dark. So this is the point of where I looked at the painting and I thought, I've got to have that table darker. So it wasn't in the photo, but it is in my picture. And that's a great part. Whenever you're painting, it's your interpretation. So try things out. If you don't like it, you can always do another painting. It's never a waste because every time we paint, we continue to get better. So for painting this whipped cream, I would just want to encourage you, take a look at the picture, at your photo reference, get an idea of where the darks are and how that looks, because what I would do is paint in a tiny bit of the dark because I wanted to create depth in there. I wanted someone to see the fold of cream. But this mug, this whipped cream that I have, does not match the photo exactly. It doesn't have to. And when I was very young, I loved to paint, but I tried to draw, I tried to paint everything exactly what it was. And I wish I would have had a coach to tell me not to do that, but just to remember to enjoy the process. And I love creating this whipped cream. I used tiny bits of purple, tiny bits of horizon blue. I used that neutral tone in there, and I added a tiny bit of orange. And when I say a tiny bit, it's very watered down. And just did that and just looked at the whipped cream. I get to a point where I can look at something and I can start to see it the way that I want it to. I don't know how other people do that, but there's times where I can get lost in it and I actually see what I'm doing, and I'm not looking at the reference photo anymore. So find your way through. So right now I've moved on and I'm wanting to add more layers into this mug and into the other things. And what that's going to do, it's going to complete it. It's going to look more like a realistic mug and cookies. This was such a fun painting. I probably will do it again in the future too. So as I'm wrapping this up, I'm taking a moment, I'm looking at this. You can see the palette up there and the colors that I've mentioned today. And I am just deciding, what are those final touches that I want to add in there, to make the lid look more like a lid, to have a shadow somewhere. So as I'm finishing that off, and I want to show you some close-ups of what it looked like done. And there's the cookies. When you add more layers of the colors, it makes the object look more realistic. So I will add, 4 layers. This picture I would have done about 4 layers of paint. So subscribe. I would love to see you the next time. You guys take care.